Well, I can read out your card and then I'll ask you. MJ Mace, Program Director, Climate Change and Energy Program for Field, Foundation for International Environmental Law and Development. Okay, so there's thousands of people here and we're never quite sure who's doing what. So what are you doing here?
What am I doing here? Okay. I'm on the Micronesian delegation. I'm here with two other colleagues from Field. We provide support to the Alliance of Small Island States in the climate negotiations on a country delegation so that we can be in the negotiations and provide that support on a hands-on basis. So basically we're all following different issues, answering questions that the delegates have, doing a bit of quick research. We have a fair amount of institutional memory because we've been involved in the negotiations for quite some time. So if people have questions, we just chime in. If there are issues around drafting language, happy to help draft language. So we're basically just here to help.
Okay, I hope the sound is okay because there's a bit of background noise here as delegates drift past, murmuring to themselves about the next recommendation, I'm sure. And I should just point out that one of the problems the smaller countries, many smaller countries have here is that the big guys come with delegations, huge delegations, 50, 60 people, I've seen some of them, who can be in all sorts of committees simultaneously and can work out what's going on. And some of the smaller countries who are going to be hit hardest have real difficulty keeping up. So I think having people like you in there is just invaluable. So let's get to the point here. The countries are kind of in line here for climate change. They are the first in line, possibly. Is that a feeling that is among the group? I mean, yes.
Absolutely, and it's been acknowledged for years. I mean, for years, small island states have been years, the debate raged about whether climate change impacts are being felt now or whether they'd be felt in the future. What's the difference between climate change and climate variability, all this. And so it's quite a relief that the IPCC's fourth assessment report has been so incredibly plain about the impacts that are now being suffered. And also the IPCC reports provided fairly specific projections about what kinds of impacts you're likely to see on ecosystems with different changes in temperature, impacts on coral reef bleaching, impacts of sea level rise, what projected ranges of sea level rise might be over different time frames and with different greenhouse gas concentrations. And all that information is very valuable because it essentially shows the scientific basis for what small island states have been describing as happening for years now.
But is there an element of frustration that things are taking so long?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the convention was agreed in '92, and here we're sitting here in 2007, almost 2008, talking about how to accomplish long-term cooperative action to enhance implementation of the convention. I mean, this is the title for one agenda item. And it's almost farcical. I mean, we're revisiting convention obligations that were agreed again, 15 years, 16 years ago that haven't actually been implemented. And so here we are just saying the same things over and over and over again. It's exceedingly frustrating.
But have you any hope that this time, are there any indications? You're in there, you're in the chamber, you've got an idea of what's going on, which is more than some of us have. Is there any indication that this is moving along, or is it just the same snail's pace?
Well, what's interesting about this session is we're in a kind of pivotal period. You've got Kyoto Protocol parties, Annex OneWorld, developed country parties who have targets, and we're looking at what those targets could be for the second commitment period of Kyoto. And so you have a group of countries with targets looking at new, more ambitious targets, and we're talking about what level of ambition is the right level of ambition to get us toward, the ultimate objective of the convention, which is avoiding dangerous climate change. But interestingly, at the same time, we have a parallel negotiating process going on for countries that don't have Kyoto Protocol targets, looking at Annex 1, developed country non-Kyoto parties. What can be done? I think we have two of them right now. We have Australia and the U.S., although Australia is now jumping in, thankfully. What do you do about these parties? How do you come up with a demonstration of comparable effort from these countries that don't have Kyoto targets and that aren't perhaps in the short term looking at targets? How do you come up with mitigation efforts that are comparable to what other countries are doing? And also, how do you bring developing countries on board, some of the more developing countries and the more industrialized developing countries, and create the opportunity for these countries to contribute to global mitigation efforts? What kind of incentives are needed? What kind of sectors could be addressed? But basically, it needs to be a global effort. We already know from the IPCC that in order to stabilize concentrations at a level that would be below 2 degrees is going to require a global effort of reducing emissions by between 50 and 85% by 2050. And for small island states, we're looking for more than that, of course, because 2 degrees is already way too much. It's way more than small island states can handle.
Is that because of sea level rise, or a whole range of factors?
It's a whole range of factors. Actually, sea level rise is one of them. But in the nearer term, the impacts that will be seen will be coral bleaching, which will happen. If temperatures increase another 1 to 2 degrees, you'll see a massive amount of coral bleaching. And of course, corals provide a natural buffer zone for many small island states. Also provide nearshore nurseries for small islands who rely very much on the fisheries. So you've got that impact, but you also have increasingly severe, frequent extreme weather events, and some of these are changing their patterns. And of course, as the climate system becomes more unstable, these events are really devastating.
Okay, now what I can't imagine is you're negotiating, you're in the committee rooms. How do you negotiate? And this is the question, I think, behind Jeff from Denver, one of our regular questioners. What leverage does Micronesia have in negotiations like this? So how other than saying, hey, we're in the firing line, how do you get your way? How do you press your case?
Well, hello, Jeff from Denver. I think the big challenge really is finding where your leverage is. And this is meant to be the UN process, it's meant to operate by consensus. And so if you have a strong position, you defend your position as best you can, and you do what you can to make sure that in forging that consensus, your issues are taken on board. There are certain areas in the negotiating process, whether it's linking one issue to another issue or being strategic about where but essentially, each country is supposed to have an equal vote, believe it or not, in this process, even though clearly different countries have different political clout, different economic clout, can work behind the scenes to achieve ends you would hope might not be achieved so readily. I don't know how to put that diplomatically. But every country, in theory, has an opportunity to make its issues heard, and not so much to block consensus, but to affirmatively contribute to that consensus so that the agreements that are reached are responsive to the needs that you've come here to express.
Do countries, say in the Pacific, negotiate in a bloc to give themselves more power? I mean, do they say, well, we won't accept your tourist ships or whatever it is that you can bargain?
Yeah, I mean, the Alliance of Small Island States does negotiate in a bloc. And so you've got 43 small island states who obviously, if they share a common position, will negotiate far more effectively. Because, of course, you have the weight of 43 countries behind you. So I think, how does Micronesia make a difference? Well, if on a particular issue we're speaking on behalf of the Alliance of Small Island States, that carries a fair bit of weight. What we do as a group, because, again, our human resources are so limited and there's so many agenda items, is that different people are tasked to follow different agenda items. So somebody will run off to, tech transfer, someone will run off to 1CP10, someone to the dialogue, someone to the AWG. I mean, people are scattered all over the place. But the problem is, even so, your resources are very limited. So you might put your flag up and make an oral intervention, but maybe you don't have 5, 10 people behind you the way the OPEC countries do to each support each other. But nevertheless, even spreading people out, it's just it's an overwhelmingly complex process, and just even making your way physically from one room to another. Our AOSIS meeting room is in a different hotel, so we have to go in and out of the security twice just to make it from our morning AOSIS meeting to the G77 meeting. It's these things people don't think about. Yeah,
it is an amazing process. Just to remind you, it's OneClimate.net, their island on Second Life on which you're inhabiting.